If Skubal does get dealt, where do you think he goes? Because on one hand, it is very silly to have this conversation of like who could use the best left-handed pitcher on earth. What team could use Tarik Skubal is like, well, every team could use Tarik Skubal. But what teams are in a situation where, one, they have the prospect capital, and two, they have an incentive, they are motivated, they are frankly desperate enough to go ahead and part with that prospect capital?
I mean, I can throw out some teams. The team they're playing right now, the Cubs, I think are a great fit. I don't love their prospect capital, but I'll throw them out there. I'll throw out Atlanta for sure. I think Atlanta's probably the top of my list in terms of a team in a situation with an improved farm system after a really interesting draft that they just had where they kind of restocked the farm a little bit. I think Atlanta would be at the top of my list if I had to guess right now who was most likely to try and do it and to make a big swing like that. The point that I want to make, and I want to hear who's on your mind in terms of Skubal suitors as well, but one point about this conversation that I think is important and is relevant to the thing we always say, oh, these teams are procrastinating. We say that in the context of teams adding or subtracting or making any decisions. That's all true, and that is based on their playoff odds and their records and whatever. Really what that means, though, too, and this is especially relevant for a Skubal potential trade talks, if you're interested in Skubal, and I'm sure there are teams that are, as you just said, their best offers are still so far away. There's no reason for them to call Scott Harris now and offer him all of your best prospects, right? There's just no reason to do that. So I guess if you think you could overwhelm him right now, that would be a reason, but that's just not how these teams operate. So we're so far away, not just from the Tigers knowing if they're going to trade him or not, we're so far away from the teams that are interested, even constructing anything or understanding where they are comfortable going to make a deal for him. And that is related to also potentially how he's going to look over the next 2 hours. No, maybe not as much. I think we see now, we think he's probably healthy, but that's part of the conversation too. That other side of what the offers are, we're not even close to knowing what teams are willing to do yet. And that's why it makes it even harder to know which teams are going to be in the mix.
The two teams that I think owe it to themselves to consider this are Milwaukee and Tampa Bay. Two teams that tend to act more rationally, passively at the deadline. Two teams that are atop their divisions. Two teams that feel like a guarantee to be in October, and frankly, a near guarantee to have a bye in October, which I think is relevant. And two teams that could use a Tarik Skubal. The Brewers don't have Kyle Harrison right now. They are running out Logan Henderson, Shane Drohan, and Robert Gasser at the back of the rotation. I know that those are better pitchers than their name value. They're on the Brewers. That's how it goes. I would rather have Tarik Skubal come October. Similar situation going on with Tampa with their rotation. I just think it's like with these smaller market teams that have these big farm systems, go do it. Go do the thing. Yeah. Be stupid. Be dumb. Be irrational. Live forever. Trade for Tarik Skubal. Do I think it'll happen? No, I don't. If I had to pick a team most likely to do this right now, it would still be the Dodgers. Just because their system is stacked with, I think, the types of players that the Tigers would be interested in. Go ahead. Do you agree or disagree with that?
And that's just the problem is the average fans, Dodgers, Scott Harris, if he decides he's going to trade Skubal, he doesn't care what baseball fans think where they're sending him. I don't think. Maybe there's an inkling of
chance.
You don't want to send him in division, but I don't think it matters, right? If the Guardians give him the best offer, I think he's going to trade him to the Guardians if they decide he's going to trade him.
Because it's not as if this guy's going to be killing you for the next 10 years wherever you trade him, right? You're trading him somewhere. Chances are he's there for 10 starts, and then you move on.
If that.
The last point I do want to make about the Skubal dynamic is that if the Tigers do trade Skubal, they're not doing it to be good in 2029 or 2030. the argument that the Tigers will make if they trade him, and the argument that the Tigers will make when or if he leaves in free agency, is that there is a world post Skubal, that the Detroit Tigers franchise is not going to crumble and implode when the talented Southpaw is wearing a different uniform. This is a good farm system. They have a lot of interesting players. They can survive in a post-Skubal world. The types of players they would seek in any type of deal for Skubal, in my mind, would be more like major league contributors with team control, upper minors prospects. They're not going to, acquire 5 high ceiling Dominican shortstops that are 17 in the DSL, right? And I think that is just sort of important to understand when you're talking about the types of organizations that match up with them in a trade. And because the Dodgers have all of this like high minors, big league controllable pitching, like, okay, again, this is just irrational. I know it's not how it works because I watched All-Star Justin Wroblewski shove last night. Justin Wroblewski for Tarik Skubal. 1-for-1.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a value standpoint, it would be an interesting conversation. I have to imagine that no matter what this trade ends up looking like, it's going to have to include more than a 1-for-1. I just think that the optics of that and just the risk tolerance for literally any player is not going to be worth it. Yeah. No, but I totally see what you're getting at when you're just talking about the value of like, okay, here's an all-star starting pitcher that's under team control for several more years compared to one who's better than that starting pitcher, but is going to be gone in a couple months. So that would be that's also when we talk about the Dodgers, though, that is an option to them because they have players like Justin Wroblewski that they can trade. They have almost every kind of player to move to that could attract the Tigers. They're not the only team with the deep farm system, but they really have, especially if we're talking about major league pitching, they have more of it that they could part with and then be fine than almost any other team.
So to wrap up this conversation, this morning, Jordan woke up on the no side of bed. I woke up on the yes side of bed, and that's because I watched the Tigers highlights before I fell asleep.